I am Ophelia, 33 years old, a neurologist in New York. My whole life has seemed to be overshadowed by my younger sister, Lydia. She was the pride of the family, the shining star my parents always bragged about, while I was seen only as the quiet shadow behind her. That evening, I stood in the grand hall of the Plaza Hotel, where Lydia's lavish wedding with Thomas, heir to a famous real estate empire, was being held. Glittering crystal chandeliers, pure white tablecloths, and more than 300 elegantly dressed guests created a perfect picture for such an important day. I forced a smile, lifted my glass of wine, and tried to blend into the celebration, though inside me lingered an emptiness I could not describe. When it came time for toasts, my mother, Margaret, 61 years old, stepped onto the stage. She wore a deep blue gown, her silver hair styled in an elegant bun, holding a glass of champagne. I sighed, bracing myself to hear another speech praising Lydia, just like so many times before. When Lydia was born, she began, her eyes shining with pride, I knew she was special. She was always determined and ready to do whatever it took to get what she wanted. Light laughter rippled through the room. I lowered my head, took another sip of wine, and thought, the same words again. But suddenly my mother paused, her face turning stern, her eyes fixing directly on me. And because of that determination, she lowered her voice, Lydia has done things no one would expect. I can't stay silent any longer. Tonight I must tell the truth. The room held its breath. My heart pounded wildly in my chest. My mother turned toward the groom, then back to Lydia and continued, her voice trembling. Lydia has been secretly sabotaging her sister Ophelia's life for years. She spread false information to block her sister's medical career. The sound in the hall dropped into a void. The glass in my hand shook, and before I could steady it, it fell, shattering into hundreds of pieces on the marble floor. The sharp crash silenced the wedding completely. I looked at my sister. In Lydia's blue eyes, I caught a fleeting but undeniable trace, guilt. But my mother didn't stop. Her voice cracked, but her tone stayed firm. You seduced Nathan, your sister's fiancé, to tear them apart. You even hired someone to damage the plumbing in Ophelia's apartment, forcing her to leave the home she had lived in for years. And that is only part of what you've done. Gasps spread through the tables. Stunned eyes turned toward Lydia. Thomas, the groom, stared at his new wife, his face drained of color. Lydia gave a strained laugh, running a hand through her perfectly styled hair, then looked around. Please don't believe this. My mother, she's had too much to drink. Today is my wedding with Thomas, not a time for wild stories. But no one laughed with her. The tension was suffocating. I sat frozen, my hand clutching the tablecloth to keep from trembling. Everything thundered in my ears like a storm. I asked myself, could it be that all the misfortunes I had suffered weren't just bad luck, but the cold calculation of my own sister? In that moment, I knew my life would never be the same. Secrets exposed at this glittering wedding became the spark that would drive me to uncover the truth. I took a deep breath and rose from my seat. The scraping of my chair echoed in the suffocating silence. Without a word, I walked through the stares of hundreds of guests and left the bright hall. Behind me, chaos erupted. Lydia's shrill denials, Thomas's sharp questions, and the guests' anxious whispers. I walked straight into the garden, where dim golden lights lit the maple trees swaying in the night wind. My heart raced, my mind in turmoil but clearer than ever. From that moment, my journey had begun. The journey to unmask the truth and confront the darkness buried for so many years within my own family. I left that wedding in turmoil. All night I couldn't sleep, my head spinning with my mother's words spoken before hundreds of witnesses. Part of me wanted to believe it was just drunken impulse, but Lydia's lost expression betrayed everything. The next morning, I packed my things and drove to my apartment in Brooklyn, still under repair. But the workers were inside, dust filled the air, and the smell of paint was unbearable. I called my grandmother Helen, who still lived in her old house in Queens. When I told her I needed a place to stay, she simply said, "Come right away, Ophelia. I'll be waiting." Helen, now 83, was still sharp and clear-minded. Since childhood, she had been the only one in the family truly on my side. As I dropped my suitcase in my old room, she sat watching me over her reading glasses, her eyes wise and knowing. "Do you believe what your mother said last night?" she asked in a low voice. I hesitated. "I don't know. But I know Lydia. she cut in. She always wants what others have. To me, her eyes aren't the eyes of a sister full of love. They're the eyes of someone who takes. Her words made me shiver. Maybe deep down I had known it all along, but I never dared to name it. In the days that followed, I began noticing things I had overlooked before. A few weeks before the wedding, I had accidentally overheard Lydia on the phone in the dressing room. Her voice was low but sharp. "Don't worry, she doesn't suspect a thing. Just follow the plan, I'll handle the rest." When she saw me appear, Lydia flashed a bright smile, explaining that every bride got stressed over flowers. Back then I believed her. Now I didn't. And then there was Nathan, my former fiancé. He had once broken up with me without a clear reason, only saying there was something off in our relationship. Looking back now, I remembered the uneasy look in his eyes at the wedding when he walked beside Lydia. It wasn't the look of an ordinary guest. It was the look of someone far more entangled. A week later, while I was still drowning in that chaos, I received a message from someone unexpected, Clara, Thomas's younger sister. We had only met a few times during the wedding preparations, but Clara wrote that she wanted to meet me privately because it's something important about Lydia. We arranged to meet at a small cafe in Manhattan. Clara arrived in a long coat, her face serious. After a few pleasantries, she placed a small USB drive on the table and slid it toward me. "You need to see this." Lydia left her laptop at my family's vacation home. I checked it and found a secret email account. I thought, you should know. My hands shook when I plugged the USB into my laptop later. A flood of emails appeared. Their content left me frozen. There were emails sent to a member of the hospital board where I worked, smearing my professional ability and ethics. The sender was none other than Lydia. She claimed I had misdiagnosed patients, that I was irresponsible, and that I was unfit for promotion. Next came a string of text messages with Nathan. Lydia carefully coached him on ways to test Ophelia's loyalty, constantly planting the idea that I was too busy and didn't truly care for him. One message nearly stopped my breath. "If she really loves you, she'll cancel her shift to be with you. But she won't. I'm different. I'll always put the person I love above everything." That wasn't all. Clara also handed me a copy of an invoice from a plumbing company. The client's name was Lydia, and the service address was my apartment. Strangely, on the very same day, there was another repair invoice for Lydia's own apartment, as if she had staged it to cover her tracks. I held my head in my hands, feeling the ground collapse beneath me. But Clara wasn't finished. "There's one more thing," she said slowly. "I found a bank statement from the joint account your parents set up for you and Lydia years ago. You barely touched it, but Lydia had been making regular small withdrawals. Altogether, more than $30,000. I was stunned. Piece by piece, the puzzle came together. My blocked career, my broken engagement, my ruined home, my drained finances. None of it was random. I turned to Clara, my eyes red. "Why are you helping me? This is my family's business." Clara sighed. "Because I see what you don't. Lydia isn't just hurting you, she's starting to stir up trouble in my family too. She's plotting more than you realize. If you want to expose the truth, I'll stand with you." I clutched the USB in my hand, a surge of fury and determination rising inside me. Everything was clear now. My sister, the one I had once loved and trusted, was the mastermind behind the tragedies in my life. But instead of screaming or raging, I felt an eerie calm. Because I knew this was only the beginning. And I, Ophelia, would not stop until the whole truth came to light. The evidence Clara gave me cut like a knife into my heart. I could no longer deny it. Lydia had been destroying my life in the shadows for years. What I still couldn't understand was why. Why would a sister hate her own blood to that extent? That question haunted me night after night. At last, I decided I had to hear the answer from my father, the so-called peacemaker in the family who had never confronted conflict head-on. One Friday afternoon, I arranged to meet him, Richard, 65 years old, at a small Italian restaurant in Midtown. He arrived 10 minutes late, looking as busy as ever, his tie slightly askew. After a few casual questions, I looked him straight in the eye. "I need the truth, Dad. I've found evidence Lydia sabotaged me. But what I don't understand is why Mom always defends her no matter what she does. Do you know something I don't?" Richard froze. He tapped his fingers on the table, his eyes heavy with fatigue. Finally he sighed. "Ophelia, It's time you knew. Lydia is not my biological daughter. I went numb. The sounds of the restaurant vanished, leaving only the pounding of my heart. What did you say? I whispered. 30 years ago when you were 3, he began slowly, your mother had an affair with one of my former business partners, a man named Charles Monroe. When she became pregnant, I knew the child wasn't mine. But I decided to stay silent to hold the family together. I raised Lydia as my own. Other than your mother and one of her sisters, no one else ever knew. I was stunned, my whole body trembling. Suddenly, everything became clear. The way my mother always protected Lydia, the harsh comparisons she made against me, the absurd favoritism, it all came from her guilt. So, because Lydia isn't Dad's biological child, Mom spoiled her excessively to make up for it? I bit my lip, bitterness rising inside me. Richard nodded. I think, in part, yes. Your mother was always afraid Lydia would feel different, afraid she'd realize she didn't belong. So she did everything to make sure Lydia was noticed, always in the spotlight. And you became the one who had to endure in silence. I finished, my voice choked. He lowered his head, not denying it. But that wasn't the end. In the days that followed, I talked more with my grandmother Helen. She was the one who had witnessed this cycle in our family from the very beginning. One evening, as we sat on the wooden chairs outside her porch, she held my hand, her voice low and sorrowful. Ophelia, maybe you don't know, but this didn't start with your mother. It began in the generation before. Your mother, Margaret, was once a victim too. I looked at her, confused. What do you mean? Helen nodded softly, her eyes distant. Your mother had an older sister named Evelyn. Back then, Evelyn was the brilliant one, loved more by your grandfather. Margaret always felt inferior. When they grew up, both fell in love with the same man, your father. Richard chose Margaret. But instead of reconciling, Margaret used the situation, accused Evelyn of being a homewrecker, and turned the family against her. They've been estranged ever since. I froze. So my mother had done to her sister exactly what Lydia was doing to me. A vicious cycle repeating across generations. One turned into the scapegoat, the other crowned the favorite. Grandma, my voice cracked. You mean history is repeating itself, just with different players? Helen squeezed my hand. That's right, Ophelia. And you must understand, if no one stops it, this cycle will continue forever. From Evelyn to you, from you to someone else. A family trapped in jealousy and favoritism. I felt both pain and clarity. All those years I thought the fault was mine, that I wasn't smart enough, pretty enough, perfect enough to be loved. But the truth was, my life had been caught in a script my mother unconsciously repeated from the generation before. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, staring at the dim streetlights outside. Two conflicting emotions swirled in me: fury at being sacrificed in this family game, and fierce determination. I would not let this cycle continue. When I remembered Lydia's gaze at the wedding, the gaze not of a sister but of a rival, I understood she had become a product of wrongful indulgence and protection. But that could not excuse her for destroying my life. My family's story was no longer just my private tragedy. It was a truth that had to be revealed, to end a toxic cycle spanning decades. And I, Ophelia, was the one who had to do it. After the conversations with my father and Grandma Helen, I realized that the tragedy didn't only come from Lydia's jealousy, but from a chain of mistakes passed down through generations. I decided I wouldn't seek blind revenge. Revenge would only turn me into another version of Lydia. What I needed was to bring the truth to light. One long night of thinking, I wrote down a plan in 3 phases. Phase 1. Restore my career. The lies Lydia spread had damaged my reputation at the hospital. I knew if I didn't reclaim my honor, I wouldn't have the strength to face anyone in the family. I began by meeting privately with the hospital director, Dr. Harold Simmons, 58 years old. He had once believed the rumors about me, which was why I had been removed from the promotion list. I presented the copied emails Clara had found on Lydia's laptop. When he saw the sender was Lydia's secret account, Dr. Simmons froze. By God, so it was all fabricated, he muttered. Yes, I replied calmly. And this is only the tip of the iceberg. I cannot allow lies to destroy the career I've built my whole life. A week later, the hospital board formally apologized to me and restored the position I had been denied. the youngest head of neurology in the hospital's history. The feeling of vindication gave me back a piece of my strength. Phase 2. Collect evidence. I knew that to expose the truth within my family, I couldn't rely on words alone. Lydia was a master manipulator, and my mother always found excuses for her. I needed undeniable proof. I spent weeks quietly gathering everything. Bank statements proving Lydia withdrew more than $30,000 from the joint account. Text messages between Lydia and Nathan, plus his own bitter admission during a private meeting. Plumbing service receipts that perfectly matched the day my apartment flooded. Testimonies from 2 colleagues Lydia had manipulated into spreading lies about me. I organized everything into separate folders, carefully numbered. Watching the stack of documents grow thicker on my desk, I knew I was getting closer to my goal. The truth would be seen, no longer hidden. Phase 3. Stop Lydia from destroying Thomas's family. If my career being ruined was already terrible, then Lydia stepping into Thomas's family was an even bigger threat. The Hamilton real estate empire Thomas inherited was my sister's next target. Clara told me Lydia had already begun planting doubt between Thomas and his parents. One afternoon, Clara sent me a secret recording where Lydia told Thomas, "Your parents want to keep all the control. They've never seen you as the true heir. We have to be ready for the day they turn their backs." I shivered listening to it. It was exactly the same tactic I had endured, planting mistrust within the family, making herself the only one worth trusting. If I didn't stop her in time, Lydia would tear apart another family and seize power that wasn't hers. I arranged a private meeting with Victoria Hamilton, 82 years old, Thomas's grandmother, a sharp-minded woman who had helped build the company with her husband. When I handed her the recording, her eyes lit with steel resolve. "Thank you, Ophelia. Our family suspected something was wrong with Lydia, but we never imagined she was this cunning. I will stand with you. But remember, we must do this the right way, not for revenge but to protect the truth." Her words made me more determined. I realized I wasn't alone anymore. From that moment, the 3-phase plan was crystal clear. I had restored my career, proving myself with the truth. I was gathering evidence, preparing for the day of exposure. And I now had an ally within the Hamilton family to stop Lydia before she destroyed another home. That night, I sat in Grandma Helen's study, staring at the thick stack of files on the desk. My heart no longer trembled as it once had. Instead, there was calm and a burning determination. I whispered to myself, "Ophelia, the time has come. Not for revenge but to end the toxic cycle that's lasted too long. The truth will come to light, and this time, no one will hide it again." That Christmas Eve, all of New York City was blanketed in white snow. The streets glowed with holiday lights, and the Hamilton mansion on Long Island sparkled like a fairy tale winter painting. This was the stage for the plan Victoria and I had prepared for weeks. When I stepped into the grand hall, light from the nearly 13-foot tree shimmered across the room. I wore a deep blue velvet dress, my hair falling loosely. My heart pounded, but my steps were steady. I was no longer the passive sister who endured. I was a woman ready to bring the truth to light. The family guests were all present. Thomas, his face stern. Clara, quiet but with determined eyes. My father, Richard, looking tense. My mother, Margaret, forcing a smile while clutching a red gift box. And of course, Lydia appeared last, holding Thomas's arm as if she were still the queen of the evening. Dinner passed smoothly in the festive atmosphere. The clinking of silverware against porcelain mixed with laughter, the scent of roasted turkey and the taste of red wine. But I knew this piece was only the prelude. When dessert was served, Victoria tapped her spoon against a crystal glass. "Before we end the evening," her voice rang out in the room, "I have a special gift for the whole family. And the one to open it will be Ophelia." I drew in a deep breath, stood up and walked to the laptop already set on the long dining table. Lydia's eyes flashed with suspicion. I opened it and the screen projected onto the wall behind the table. Across it appeared the words, "The truth cannot be hidden." The air in the room instantly grew heavy. I began, my voice steady. "These are the proofs of what Lydia has done to me, and to the Hamilton family itself." One by one, the documents appeared on the screen. The fabricated emails to the hospital board that damaged my career. The messages with Nathan, my ex-fiancé, showing Lydia's deliberate sabotage of our relationship. The plumbing repair invoice proving Lydia caused the flood that forced me out of my apartment. The bank statements with dozens of withdrawals from the joint account, totaling more than $30,000. With each piece of evidence, I explained clearly. No one interrupted except for the sound of Lydia's heavy breathing. When it came to the part about Thomas and the Hamilton Company, I played the recording. Your parents never valued you. If we want to keep control, we have to be one step ahead. Lydia's voice rang out, cold and sharp. The whole table went silent. Thomas stared at his wife, face pale. Clara clenched her fists tight. Enough. Lydia suddenly shot up, her chair crashing behind her. You're just making this up out of jealousy. Everyone here knows you've always envied me. I kept my calm gaze. If you think this is fabricated, then explain this. Immediately, Clara plugged a small USB into the laptop. A recording played, Lydia's voice and my mother's, Margaret's. I can't believe you'd say that at my wedding. After all these years you've helped me, now you turn your back. Lydia's voice seethed with rage. You promised me you'd stop after you got married. Margaret's voice shook. Why should I stop? Ophelia deserves it. Did you see her face the day she lost her position? That was unforgettable. Lydia sneered in the recording. An uproar broke out around the table. Thomas froze, pale as ever. Richard, my father, suddenly slammed his hand down, his voice booming for the first time in years. Enough, Margaret. All these years you've covered for Lydia, turning this family into chaos. No more silence. My mother trembled, stammering, I just wanted to protect her. Protect her. My father's voice was firm. You destroyed your own daughter just to make up for past mistakes. And now you're ready to watch Lydia ruin the Hamilton family too. The air grew suffocating. Lydia spun toward Thomas, screaming, You don't believe this garbage, do you? Say something. Thomas looked at her for a long moment, then slowly removed his wedding ring. There's nothing left to believe, Lydia. This marriage ends here. Lydia's face drained of color. No, you can't leave me. Everything I did was for us. No, Thomas's voice was ice. Everything you did was only for yourself. Victoria rose to her feet, her voice cutting through the tension. Lydia, leave this house immediately. There is no place for liars and saboteurs in the Hamilton family. The click of Lydia's heels struck hard against the marble floor, echoing with bitterness as she was escorted out. The door closed, leaving behind a heavy silence. My father turned to me, his voice choked. I'm sorry, Ophelia. For all the years I stayed silent. I looked at him, tears blurring my eyes, but my heart felt light. For the first time in my life, he had stood on the side of truth. My mother bowed her head, saying nothing more. She knew there were no excuses left. I sat down, taking a deep breath. The whole room felt freed after a storm. And in that moment I understood. My life had just turned to a completely new page. After that Christmas Eve, nothing was the same. The veil hiding the truth for so many years had fallen, leaving behind shattered pieces each of us had to face. For me, the first feeling was liberation. The next day, when I returned to the hospital, my colleagues greeted me with entirely different eyes. They whispered that they finally understood why my career had been derailed. The board of directors sent an official letter restoring my reputation, and Dr. Simmons handed me the position of head of neuroscience research, a promotion I once thought I would never see again. In that joy, I realized I had found myself again, no longer Lydia's shadow, but a doctor recognized for my true ability. And at the hospital, a new door in my life quietly opened. The colleague who had often defended me in meetings, Dr. Daniel Brooks, 37 years old, a neurosurgeon, unexpectedly asked me out for coffee after a shift. Ophelia, he said, you've endured too much injustice. But I believe you never let bitterness kill your heart. That's what makes me admire you. We began seeing each other more often, from scientific talks to light dinners. In Daniel's honest eyes, I found the peace I had long been missing. As for Lydia, everything collapsed quickly. Thomas filed for divorce just 1 week after Christmas. The process swift thanks to undeniable evidence. She was forced out of the Hamilton estate and had no place left in the high society she had dreamed of. The case of the withdrawals from our joint account was also brought to court by my lawyer. After much dispute, Lydia was ordered to repay the full amount of more than $30,000, plus civil penalties. Local newspapers quickly spread the news, turning her image as the perfect bride into a laughingstock. Then one day in March, I received a short email from an unfamiliar address. Ophelia, I've started therapy. The doctor says I show signs of narcissistic personality disorder. I'm not sure I believe it all, but at least for the first time I see how twisted the way I live is. I know you have no reason to forgive me, but I want to try being honest for once. Lydia. I read it over and over, my heart tangled. No matter how much evidence had exposed her, deep down, I still felt sorrow for my sister. Someone raised in favoritism and lies, until she lost her very humanity. My father, Richard, after that Christmas Eve for the first time set boundaries for his own life. He moved into a small apartment in Manhattan and told my mother directly, "Margaret, I will no longer stay silent while you cover for Lydia. If you won't face the truth, we need distance." I had never seen my father so strong. The man who once avoided conflict finally learned to stand tall. It pained me, but it also gave me relief. At least he would no longer let the fear of keeping the family whole destroy anyone else. My mother was different. She sank into a cycle of denial, at times blaming me for being cruel, other times blaming herself for repeating the mistakes of her generation. I'll never forget the afternoon she came to me, eyes swollen with tears. "Ophelia, you don't understand. Everything I did was just to keep Lydia close. If the truth came out, she would lose everything." I looked straight at her and calmly replied, "But you sacrificed me to save her. And in the end, you lost us both." She stayed silent. I knew it might take her years to truly face her mistakes. But at least the cycle had been broken, because I had spoken out instead of enduring in silence. In April, as new buds began to sprout on the trees, I stood on the balcony of the apartment I had just bought in Brooklyn, gazing at the city under the spring sunlight. Inside, Grandma Helen was reading a book, while Daniel busied himself cooking dinner. I suddenly realized, at last I had a home, a family not built on lies but on truth and love. I understood that the greatest victory was not Lydia being exposed, not the court ordering her to pay damages, nor the new position at the hospital. The true victory was that I dared to end the toxic cycle passed down through generations. I lifted my face to the clear blue sky and whispered, "From now on, I will live no longer as a victim. I am Ophelia, the one who stepped out of my family's shadows, and I will never go back." 1 year after that fateful Christmas Eve, my life had completely changed. If someone had told me that I would find peace after the storm of family betrayal, I would have laughed. But now, as I stood on the porch of the small red brick house in Brooklyn, the home I bought with my own hard work, I knew it was true. The house had a backyard large enough for Grandma Helen to grow roses, and for me to raise a little dog. Every morning I went to work at the hospital, and in the evenings, I returned to the kitchen filled with the smell of Grandma's cookies, and sometimes the simple dinners Daniel, the man who patiently entered my life, was preparing. I realized that family is not only where you were born but also where you choose to belong. My career too reached a new height. The regenerative neuroscience research project I led had just received funding from a national foundation, opening doors to help thousands of patients. I was no longer the woman sidelined from promotions because of lies. I was Dr. Ophelia Carter, head of research, respected and trusted by colleagues. Even in my busiest days, I made time for those who had walked alongside me. Clara, Thomas's sister, had become a close friend. We often met for coffee on weekends, sharing work and personal thoughts. Victoria, with her piercing eyes and commanding voice, sometimes invited me to her home for warm family dinners. She often said, "You remind me that truth may hurt, but it is the only foundation that keeps a family standing." As for Lydia, her life took a completely different turn. After losing her marriage and reputation, she left New York for a while. I heard she stayed with friends in Boston, then began intensive therapy. Early that summer, I unexpectedly received a handwritten letter, hurried but sincere. "Dear Ophelia, I've spent months in therapy. For the first time, I faced myself, my selfishness, my fear of abandonment I never dared admit. I can't ask for forgiveness yet, but I want to try starting again from zero without lies. Lydia." I sat in silence for a long time, reading those lines over and over. My heart felt both warm and aching. I didn't know what the future would bring, but at least for the first time, Lydia wasn't denying her mistakes. Perhaps, however small, a door to healing had opened. As for my father, Richard, he still lived alone in Manhattan but often visited me and Grandma. He learned how to cook, how to say no when needed, and most importantly, how to be a father in the truest sense. I saw him change day by day, no longer avoiding conflict but facing the truth head on. My mother, Margaret, was the hardest to change. But recently she began attending a support group for parents who had shown favoritism toward their children. I wasn't sure she would ever fully change, but the fact that she admitted the cycle of mistakes was a beginning. I knew her journey would be long and difficult. One summer evening, I invited my closest loved ones for dinner in the garden: Grandma Helen, Daniel, Clara, and a few close colleagues. As the golden lights glowed above the grape trellis, I raised my glass and said, "Tonight I want to do something." More than a year ago at Lydia's wedding, my mother raised her glass and said, "To the child I am most proud of." Today I want to change that, to the daughter who learned that true family is built on love and truth, not blood or secrets. Everyone fell silent, then clinked glasses together. Grandma Helen's eyes glistened with tears. I knew I had finally broken free of the shadow that had weighed on me for decades. As night fell, I stepped onto the porch alone, breathing in the summer air. I thought about everything that had happened: the betrayal, the revelations, the tears, and the confrontations. Once they were only pain, but now I understood. Revealing the truth was not for revenge, but for freedom and healing. I whispered to myself, the real victory isn't that Lydia lost everything, but that I am no longer trapped in the toxic cycle. I chose to live differently. And in that moment I felt free to love, to live, to build a new family on honesty. Last, I had learned the most important lesson. True family is not defined by blood or secrets, but by love, honesty, and the courage to face the truth. From Ophelia's story, we see that in real life, anyone can fall into the cycle of favoritism, secrets, and family wounds. But truth always has the power to heal. Facing it, speaking out, and setting boundaries are the only ways to break the toxic patterns passed down through generations. Forgiveness may or may not come, but the most important thing is to find ourselves again and build a life on love and honesty. Real family is where respect and truth exist. What do you think about Ophelia's story and the choices she made? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt stories and powerful lessons about family life.